Whoa, what is going on, football fans? Back at it with another New York Giants video. Going to touch on the news that came out today about the New York Giants as we head into free agency. Free agency, I think, is in a week. And if I recall over the last couple of years, usually you hear about the bigger signings a day or two before free agency actually starts. So we're really going to start to get some news with the Giants and just the NFL in general within the next week or so. But today, the tag deadline came around, and the New York Giants had two prominent players available to potentially bring back, whether it be via the transition tag or the traditional franchise tag. The New York Giants elected to let both test the open market. And conventional wisdom would tell you more often than not, especially a player that is near the top of his market, like both of these individuals will be in Xavier McKinney and Saquon Barkley, especially when you look at some of the other players that were tagged today at McKinney's position. Antoine Winfield Jr., the safety from New England, I'm forgetting his name off the top, man. But there were two franchise tags at that position, meaning you're thinning out the talent pool at that position, meaning that McKinney is even more valuable when he hits the open market. There's less to choose from. He's 24. You have to think more than likely he's probably going to be gone. If the New York Giants wanted to prioritize him and make sure that they would be able to afford him, they would have at least transition tagged him. The Giants did not elect to do that. And I'll talk about as to why they may have decided to do that. Barkley, I saw the writing on the wall. I think a lot of Giants fans did. Last year, Schoen wasn't willing to give him reportedly $22 million guaranteed. Maybe he was, maybe he wasn't. But $22 million guaranteed essentially would have equated to $12 million against the cap this year, right? It was $10 million last year. Maybe it was 11, I think, if he would have hit incentives that he didn't hit, because obviously the Giants overall had an underwhelming year. He was a part of it. But it would have equated to about $22 million guaranteed had they tagged him this year. So, especially with the year that the team was coming off of, the fact that Barkley got hurt again, the fact that the Giants have as many holes on this team as they do, and the fact, like I talked about in my Saquon Barkley video about 2 or 3 weeks ago, that when you look at the overall running back market, the free agency market, it is loaded with talent, at least with short-term options, whether it be Barkley, whether it be Pollard, whether it be Henry, whether it be Eckler. There's a few others. Swift, I believe, is a free agent as well. There's a couple of others that are talented running backs. You have to think that market's going to thin out at some point. Not a lot of teams are going to be wanting to pay top dollar for a running back, and the Giants may not be able to bring back Barkley. They may not. Oh, Jacobs is another one. They may not be willing to spend top dollar on a running back, but they could still get a pretty good running back and not have to pay what Barkley may be commanding the New York Giants to pay. And we'll see ultimately what Barkley's market is when he gets to test the open market. It'll be interesting to see. But I think, sadly, for some Giants fans, I think a lot of Giants fans, two fan favorites, McKinney and Barkley, I think their days are numbered. I think if they were going to be back with the Giants, they probably would have been signed already. McKinney clearly, I think all signs pointed to all season that McKinney was not going to be back with this team. More than likely was not going to be back with this team. He signed a super agent that is responsible for having two of the four largest contracts in the history of the NFL at the safety position. The Giants have holes at more important positions. I was hoping he'd be back, and maybe he will be back. But I think, even especially when you factor in the high-level talent at the safety position that was tagged, I think it's even less likely that Xavier McKinney's back with the New York Giants. And a lot of fans are going to be upset, and I get it. They're fan favorites. They're popular players. Same can be said for Saquon Barkley. And you guys know I love Barkley. I like McKinney too. Let's see what they do in the offseason. Let's see what Joe Schoen decides to do when he molds his football team. I'm not going to fault Joe Schoen for not wanting to spend high-end bucks on a 27-year-old running back who's had an injury history with how bad of an offensive line we currently have, and the fact that the New York Giants are not in a situation to be able to compete for a Super Bowl. I think the departure of Barkley, if that's inevitably what happens, and I think it's more likely he'll be back than McKinney because of the things that I said. I could see the running back market being watered down, and maybe he is willing to come back here for $6 or $8 million a year. Who knows? We don't know what his market's going to be. But at that point, if you're Barkley and you're only taking $6 or $8 million, wouldn't you rather be able to compete for a Super Bowl? That's the way I would look at it if I were him. I've only got 2-3 great years left if I'm lucky. Let me go to the Houston Texans. Let me try to compete to win a Super Bowl with C.J. Stroud. Let me go to the Baltimore Ravens, whatever the team may be. That's where I think it's ultimately headed. the Giants probably would have to at least meet the top level market to bring either one of these two players back, because right now the Giants are not the most attractive destination. And sometimes you got to go through a little pain to get the team right again. And I don't know if Joe Schoen's going to be able to do that. He's done some questionable things. He's also done some smart things. It's kind of been iffy for me thus far. But I'm still going to give this guy 4 years. I still have some faith that he could get this team down the right path. But we'll have to wait and see how it all plays out. Obviously, the Andrew Thomas extension looks really good now, extending him off of last year's rate. The Dexter Lawrence contract extension looks really good. I do think he handled, as tough as it may have been, the fact that Barkley was a fan favorite, I do think he handled the Barkley contract negotiation properly. Obviously, the Daniel Jones contract, regardless of the circumstances and the fact that it may have made sense for him to make the move, doesn't look good. It looks bad, obviously. And, Evan Neal not looking great right now, but we'll wait and see how he builds this team this year. But, hey, this is what I'm going to say. What do I want to see Joe Schoen do? Build the trenches, okay? I will sacrifice a running back at Saquon Barkley, who I still think is a great running back, if we could fix the friggin' line. I will sacrifice a young, talented safety if we could fix the pass rush. If you have a great pass rush, you can mask a mediocre secondary. And if you have a good offensive line, you could get great production in the running game from solid running backs. We saw it in 2007 with Earth, Wind, and Fire. None of those guys were as talented as Saquon Barkley. None of those guys were as talented as Tiki Barber. But we had the best rushing attack in football because we had the best offensive line in football. And if you ask me what I think Joe Schoen needs to do this offseason, it's the same thing I say every offseason. Invest in the offensive line and invest in the pass rush. And I'll probably have a video. I just sneezed. Sorry about that, but we're going to continue. We don't edit on this channel. I'm probably going to have a video up in about 3 or 4 days when I talk about some of the targets that I could see the New York Giants going after in free agency, whether it's an edge rusher, whether it's the offensive line. But I think that's what they're going to target. That's what I've thought for quite some time. I expect them to sign an impactful guard, and I expect them to sign what they feel is an impactful edge rusher, probably more so in line with a guy like a Bobby Okereke, a younger player that hasn't quite peaked yet. I think a guy like Bryce Huff could make a lot of sense. And there's a few other guys that we'll talk about as well, probably in 3 or 4 days. We'll have a video up on that in terms of my predictions, I guess, in terms of guys that I think the Giants could target. But I think the Giants are going to be aggressive. And I wouldn't completely rule out Barkley or McKinney potentially being back with this football team. I just wouldn't expect it at this point. I think it's the end of an era. I think Joe Schoen is turning the page, and he's starting to build this football team in his image. And I think as fans, you have to at least give him the opportunity to do that. I know not everybody loves Joe Schoen. I know a lot of people right now are skeptical of Joe Schoen. We're 2 years in. The team still has so many question marks. But year one, he inherited a lot of Gettleman's players. The team made the playoffs. He couldn't break the team down probably the way that he wanted to. I think Schoen is a guy that's going to believe in building in the trenches. I think that's clearly obvious, and he's not going to invest premium bucks in the running back position and potentially the safety spot. Do I think he'd bring McKinney back for the right price? Absolutely. But I think McKinney's market is going to be considerably high, especially when you factor in there's even less competition now with some of the safeties that were tagged today. But we'll have to wait and see how it all plays out. But McKinney's 24. He's talented. He's ascending. Someone's going to pay him, I think, more than what the New York Giants are going to offer. It has Landon Collins written all over it. And if you ask me as a Giants fan, what would I rather the team invest in? Get me an edge rusher, man. I think that would help this defense more than a guy like McKinney. That's just my belief. If you could have a dominant pass rush, you could hide some deficiencies in the secondary. I'm definitely a corner guy. I definitely think we need to continue to try to improve that secondary. But I think you could replace McKinney, especially if you could get that pass rush back to where it needs to be. And it's been a long time coming for the New York Giants. Aren't you sick of watching this team having to blitz 50% of the time to generate any kind of pressure? Shane, you have some money to spend now. You could get flexible with the way that you could construct some of these contracts if you need a little bit more cap space. Fix the pass rush. Fix the offensive line. That's what I want to see as a fan in free agency. And then do whatever you want to do in the draft, whether it be the wide receiver, whether it be the quarterback. Build this team the way that you want. But you got to fix this team in the trenches. We've been screaming about it for 12 years. You got your opportunity. You got some cap space. You got a lot of holes to fill. Get Kayvon Thibodeau a buddy on the other side. Get some help on the interior of this offensive line. We'll see what Shane elects to do. But I do think, as I've said now for a few weeks, Giants are going to be aggressive in free agency. So buckle up. I think it's going to be an exciting time. As always, guys, if you like what you watch, please subscribe, drop a comment, maybe give me a little thumbs up. Cheers.